Hey guys, and welcome back to another Axel 72 video, and in today's video I'm going to be giving my prediction for UFC 314 Volkanovski versus Lopes. And so if you are new around here and you haven't yet subscribed, please do so, like the video if you do indeed like the video, and let's get straight into it. So this is a card in which I'm very excited for. I think as a whole, the whole card is really exciting. It's full of just exciting fights, and I'm just really intrigued to see how each matchup plays out. And I'm going to be giving a kind of full prediction for each for four of the fights on the card. And like I say, an excellent card. Just a few fights that I suppose I'm not going to give a prediction for that. Just wanted to touch upon Reyes versus Krylov. That's going to be opening up the main card. I think that's an excellent fight, a very underrated light heavyweight fight. Two guys who seemingly are on the bounce back kind of for their career and are on good winning streaks, and so that's going to be a good fight. Ige versus Woodson. Ige, always willing to fight anybody, and in with another tough guy with Woodson again. I think that's an excellent fight. Xiaonan versus Jandiroba. Xiaonan wasn't that long ago since she was last competing for the title. Put on that excellent performance there and is on a return herself, and I think that is a very tough, good fight, and that's low down on the card realistically. And also Miller versus Hooper. Hooper seemingly on a run to try and go through all the veterans whilst he can. He's still very young and went through Clay Guida last time and did it impressively, but Jim Miller is that tougher test, and it's always great to see Jim Miller feature on a card. Just a few names there in which I wanted to touch upon on the kind of undercard of the undercard, but the main kind of four fights in which I wanted to touch upon, they're, like I say, some excellent fights. I think the whole card is really good. Saying that, there was it was kind of surprising, realistically, to see that this card was this good, because obviously we had Topuria go and move up in weight. He's going to be stripped of his belt as soon as the main event happens. To see that he moved up, it kind of meant that, maybe the main event between two contenders, or, not the champion, could have been maybe a bit lesser. But I think it's an excellent fight, and like I say, to have the likes of a Paddy Pimblett, who was seemingly struggling to find an opponent, somebody willing to give him the opportunity to him, again makes for an excellent fight. Yair Rodriguez, Patricio, Pitbull. When Pitbull left Bellator, nobody was really too sure if he would go straight into the UFC, if they'd be willing to give him a contract straight away. That, of course, has happened, and it's put him into an excellent fight with Yair Rodriguez, who is also an entertaining striker and is also somebody who is going to be wanting to make a statement victory, because he's coming off a loss and is needing of that for his career, and so he's got a lot of pressure on him. And then also, Bryce Mitchell, the controversial Bryce Mitchell, is in against John Silva. John Silva literally picked this matchup for himself. He won his last fight via KO in round one. Then he just kind of said that he wanted Bryce Mitchell. Soon as that happened, pretty much we've had the fight be made, and it's impressive to see the UFC get to work like that and just be willing to put on a matchup straight away just from a call out. But it does make for an entertaining matchup, and obviously that's where we're going to start off. That's the first fight that I'm going to give a prediction for. It's, like I say, I'm not going to go too much into everything that's been going on with Bryce Mitchell. He is his own entity. He is, I'm not condoning, or I'm not, saying anything good about what he's been saying, but he is a good fighter, and he showed that last time out that he still has it when he fought Kron Gracie. Kron Gracie looked very poor realistically. He was making it a very boring fight. Some were saying he was kind of fighting like he was in the 90s, like the old Gracies used to do, but he was just jumping guard every single time that Bryce Mitchell went in close or went for the body. It was weird and it wasn't working for him. And I suppose in the second round it almost worked for him, but then Bryce Mitchell into the third round saw that he was just continually doing that and was smart and went for the elbow as he dropped down, created that bit of space, followed up with more elbows, and was able to get stoppage. Nice stoppage victory, needed stoppage victory, saying that it's the only one in his career, and saying how bad he got knocked out by Josh Emmett. He needed that stoppage victory, and it was a good one. Jean Silva himself, he's a very pronounced stoppage guy. He's been knocking out everybody and seemingly knocks you out with ease. I mean, in his last fight, he was actually just talking to his opponent. He was just walking around. He was seemingly having a lot of fun, and pretty much as soon as he decided he wanted to land a big punch, he did, and he knocked his opponent out. And then he wasn't even sure if he needed to follow up. He kind of just was that relaxed and was having that much fun with it that he just waited and then decided, the ref said he needs to carry on. He went and carried on and knocked him out with ease, ground and pound stopped him with ease. And so it is going to be an interesting contest. A lot of people are saying that Bryce Mitchell is going to be able to kind of expose Jean Silva. Jean Silva, I don't think has been tested much on the ground as of yet. And so that's going to be definitely a big factor to see how good his ground game is. And a lot of people do rate Bryce Mitchell's ground game. And I mean, I do think it is good and it is reputable. And it definitely can cause Jean Silva problems. But I do believe that Jean Silva is going to be able to win via KO in round 3. I think into the last round, he's going to be able to land a big shot. I think he's going to have rounds in the first couple rounds where he could be losing the fight. I think Bryce Mitchell will be able to get him to the ground and will cause him some problems and be able to hold him there. I don't think Jean Silva is going to show amazing amounts of ground game, but I think coming into the third round, Bryce Mitchell maybe not will slow down, but Jean Silva, I think, will just be able to maybe land the shots, get his timing down. Bryce Mitchell, after 2 rounds of just grappling and clinching, I think will want to maybe showcase that a little bit more, showcase that he can be powerful at the same time. Of course, he is, like I say, coming off that stoppage victory and might try and go for it a little bit more on the feet, and I think Jean Silva will catch him. And of course, he was caught versus Josh Emmett. I'm not necessarily sure, who's got the more so power. It's not really been necessarily proven yet, but Emmett has, I suppose, proven that he has more so power on the higher level. But I think Bryce Mitchell's chin has been hurt, and I think it can be hurt again when he's coming in. And I think Jean Silva will do that, like I say, via KO in round 3. And that is a statement, big victory for his career, and one the biggest in which the Fighting Nerds have had. And they are making such a big statement in their fights at the moment. I mean, we've got Kai Baralio, we've got Rufy, we've got of course Jean Silva as well. We've got Carlos Prates, some excellent fighters there. Jean Silva will then become a ranked fighter. Who could he go on to fight next? I think a Josh Emmett fight could be an excellent fight. Of course, he's coming off the loss versus Lerone Murphy, but it wasn't a devastating loss. He didn't look amazing in it, but he has always got that power there. And going into the older side of things, he will probably have to, willingly let up one more fighter, and he probably before he retires. And if he is willing to let up one more fighter, why not give the opportunity to Jean Silva? I think it's a fight that makes sense. It will be 2 powerful punches. If not, then maybe somebody like a Aljamain Sterling, former champ, of course, coming off the loss versus Evloev, might be willing to give the opportunity to the young guy to prove that he still has it, and might see, like I say, weaknesses in the ground game if Bryce Mitchell can have a bit of success on the ground, and then he might be willing to. If not, something like a Yusuf Salau, that could be a good fight. He's on a good winning streak at the moment, so there is a few good fights there for Jean Silva for him to progress in the featherweight division. This whole card pretty much is dedicated to the featherweight division with the 3 big matchups, and I think that's going to be a starting KO victory for Jean Silva. Moving on to Yair Rodriguez versus Patricio Pitbull. Like I say, an excellent fight. Obviously, Yair Rodriguez coming off the loss versus Ortega and the loss before that to Volkanovski. But in that Ortega fight, he did hurt Ortega in the first round. Just to be honest, like Diego Lopes did in his last fight versus Ortega. Ortega has shown that he can recover and he can survive. And he was able to do that against both of them. But inevitably, Ortega was able to submit Yair Rodriguez because his ground game isn't as strong as that of Diego Lopes's, and he hasn't got the same kind of level of scrambles, and he didn't know how to defend it quite as well. Patricio Pitbull, I think, is a very well-rounded striker, very well-rounded mixed martial artist in general. I think he's got excellent ground game, but I also think he does have really good power on his feet, and he's very explosive. He can be accurate as well, and it's going to be really interesting to see what kind of game plan Patricio Pitbull comes into this fight with, because obviously, like I say, he can go on the feet and he can be striking, and he will have success with that most likely, even though, that's where Yair Rodriguez does his best work. I still think Patricio could have success with that. But if Patricio gets him down to the ground, then he can have success there with the multiple different techniques in which he'll try and submit you with. I mean, he'll even go for heel hooks or something crazy like that, multiple different techniques. So it's all down to, I think, Yair Rodriguez's game plan maybe, because if Yair comes in aggressive, then I think Patricio will happily go on the back foot and strike because his timing is excellent, and that's where he stopped, Michael Chandler as an example. That first round KO, he let Michael Chandler come forwards and then he stopped him. He timed him, excellent timing, and then he pounces on you instantly. And so it is down to, if Yair Rodriguez is going to be wanting to sit off, then I think Patricio Pitbull will come on the front foot and then he'll try and go for a takedown slash submission, just get him up against the cage and just throw him to the ground. I think there is going to be a size difference between the two of them, but I do think Pitbull is going to be able to win via submission in round 1. Yes, that might be a controversial thing to say, it happening so early on in the fight, but I can just see it. Obviously he's got a lot of pressure upon him coming into the UFC, leaving Bellator. He was a great fighter in Bellator, but this is a different type of ball game, and there's been multiple times in which we've seen fighters turn into the UFC and not be able to have the same kind of success. I mean, even Michael Chandler, as an example, he's only ever won twice in the UFC, and so obviously he's always fought the best guys, but it's not always been the best for him. Many different fighters have progressed from other organizations and not been able to have the same level of success, showcasing that in other organizations there just isn't the same kind of level of opposition. I think Patricio has been tested by high level opposition, and I think he is shown that he can get through that, and I do think he has an excellent, like I say, well-rounded set of skills, and he will, like I say, be able to get Yair Rodriguez down straight away just with his speed and his physical nature, and then be able to submit him just like that, and I don't think Yair Rodriguez will be able to do too much about it. And then who he go on to fight next? Realistically, I think the only option of who he'll go on to fight next, if he comes and gets a first round stoppage, will be the winner of Volkanovski versus Lopes. I think there'll be a great shout for it. I think it is a really good time to see something like a Patricio Pitbull come through because, Diego Lopes will be an entertaining champion. Volkanovski, everybody loves Volkanovski as a champion, but I feel like this new kind of breed with Pitbull coming through gives a new option to the champions. If Volkanovski becomes champion again, he looks down the division and there's not really too many entertaining matchups of guys that he hasn't already fought. Of course, he's already fought Yair Rodriguez, he's already fought Ortega, so something like a Patricio Pitbull could be an excellent option. Of course, there's Evloev as well, but I don't think Evloev has quite done enough to really warrant that UFC title shot yet, coming off a close, controversial kind of win against Aljamain Sterling. So I think Patricio Pitbull, if he wins, he goes straight into a title shot, and that's what makes this fight so intriguing and entertaining. Going on now to the co-main event, excellent fight, like I say, the new versus the older generation in Michael Chandler versus Paddy Pimblett. Paddy Pimblett, like I say, was struggling to get some options of people who wanted to fight him. Poirier said no, and it didn't really seem like many people were going to say yes, to be completely honest, until Michael Chandler stepped up and has said yes. This is probably a retirement fight possibly for Michael Chandler. He obviously has come into the UFC, like I've touched upon, hasn't always had the kind of level of success I'm sure he's wanted, but he's always fought the best guys and he's always been around the top 10, mainly the top 5. He's never really given the opportunity to another fighter below him, and now he's done that, and if he is to lose, then it means that there's pretty much not really too much left for him in his career, to be completely honest. He'll be low down in the rankings, he'll just be giving more fighters opportunities, and he'll just become a name. He obviously waited a long time for his McGregor chance. If he loses this, and that McGregor chance has gone fully, so I respect Chandler for taking it, but I think Chandler has fully moved on in his career where he's just accepted that McGregor isn't going to come back, and he's just willing to take opportunities and wants entertaining fights. And I think you'll get that with a Paddy Pimblett. I think you'll get an interesting, it's been an interesting type of build-up, nothing too crazy, but I think it is a good fight, and of course a good name, a very good name if Michael Chandler is able to win. Probably, if you look around the lightweight division, probably in that lower ranking side of things, the best name for him to beat if he is going to beat a contender coming up. So I guess it's smart in that aspect. Who do I think is going to win? I think that Pimblett is going to be able to win via unanimous decision. Yes, this is the first 5-round contest for Paddy Pimblett, so it's going to be interesting to see how he fares going the full distance, in which I think he will. I think he hasn't got the same level of striking as somebody like Oliveira, who of course was Chandler's last opponent, and Oliveira caused a lot of problems striking as well as on the ground to Chandler. I think Paddy Pimblett's going to have to be very aware of the power of Chandler, and Pimblett has been known to have his chin in the air quite often. It wouldn't surprise me if Pimblett makes it a boring fight and goes to the ground quite often, because he will be able to have a lot of success there, and inevitably that's where he could get a submission or just be able to win rounds relatively comfortably on the ground. Obviously Chandler has the strength to be able to pick you up and throw you about, but that's not necessarily meaning that he's going to be able to do too much damage when he's doing that. Chandler on the feet as well can be a bit sloppy. He can be seen to just be overcommitting, so I'm sure there could be plenty of opportunities to be able to get him to the ground just by him throwing a lazy shot and you being able to slip it. But you just have to be very switched on, because when you look in the last round of the fight versus Oliveira in their second fight, Chandler caught Oliveira in the final round, and it wasn't it was the same shot in which he was thrown throughout the entire fight, but you just have to always be so switched on. So Paddy Pimblett may get caught with a shot and he could get hurt, and that's where it's going to be interesting to see how he deals with that. But I do inevitably think he's going to be able to win enough rounds, possibly in a boring fashion, to be able to win via unanimous decision. Then who he can go on to fight next, I think there is plenty of options there. Of course, this week we have seen him going back and forth with Sarukian, saying a few things about each other on Twitter. That could be a good fight. I mean, that could be a fight for Sarukian to really showcase that he's still able to beat any top contender, and he's welcoming up this new name and he's got this rivalry there, and I'm sure it will sell well, so I'm sure the UFC would give him good money for the fight. And of course Sarukian can't fight Makhachev. Dana White won't allow it because of how close the fight was the first time, and then he pulled out with the injury. And it seems like Topuria is going to be able to fight Oliveira, so that could possibly be a good fight to happen. If not a Justin Gaethje, of course, he was meant to be fighting Hooker. Hooker versus Pimblett could be a good fight as well. But if Gaethje versus Hooker does fight each other, then maybe a Sarukian fight could happen for Pimblett, maybe a Max Holloway fight. I doubt Holloway would be too bothered about that fight. So there's definitely some great options there, but he just has to be given that opportunity, and I feel like he needs to make a bit more than just a boring statement, Paddy Pimblett, to be able to really warrant opportunities from other guys, but we will have to wait and see. Going on now to the main event, so Volkanovski versus Diego Lopes, of course, for that UFC featherweight title. I think this is, like I say, a great contest. I mean, it's surprising to see that Volkanovski is still around in title shots, UFC, title shots, and I think this is his 10th or 11th UFC title fight in a row now. And, it's full credit to him. He has been such a dominant, excellent UFC fighter, but just in recent times, it hasn't been going the way for him. He's gotten, the loss versus, the two losses versus Makhachev and the loss versus Ilia Topuria now. It's not been the best of times for him as of recent. That Topuria one really was poor to see. It was not nice to see. It was, crushing for lots of fans. Lots of fans love Volkanovski. I love Volkanovski. I want him to be the champion so badly, but it's going to take a lot to be able to beat Diego Lopes. Lopes is on a good run himself. Obviously, he hasn't had the toughest of opposition just yet. Obviously, the Brian Ortega win was a very good win, the best one of his career, but other than that, he hasn't really fought anybody too crazy, and he hasn't been in a 5-rounder yet himself. Volkanovski, of course, has been in plenty of 5-rounders and has that level of experience, and has also taken a bit more time off, which is nice to see. He seemingly was maybe not falling out of love with the sport, but was having trouble really getting motivated for the sport after the Makhachev knockout, seemingly kind of in and around the time where he got knocked out by Topuria. So, to see him come back so quickly, because seemingly, I don't necessarily know what was going on with his mindset, why he came back so quickly, but he did. And obviously things went bad when he did do so. But now he's had that time out. He's had over a year, which is what you need, I feel like, when you are on the latter side of your career and you have been getting knocked out. He's gotten this opportunity, which is definitely a better opportunity than a Topuria rematch. I feel like if it was a Topuria rematch, then it would have been a much more difficult of a fight, to be completely honest. But this is a new challenge for somebody who's still a little bit of an unknown entity in the UFC to an extent. And it's going to be interesting to see if he still has it. He's still got excellent kicks. He still knows how to throw his boxing really well. And he's still can survive on the ground, and he's still an excellent fighter. But I do think that Lopes is going to be able to win via TKO in round 2. I think, unlike a Topuria, Lopes is a bit more kind of rush through you. He's going to start quickly. He's going to put it on Volkanovski. He has got power, not quite the same level of power as Topuria, and it's not quite as calculated as Topuria, but he's got really good boxing, and he will just rush through you, and he will just try and hit any kind of part of you that he can realistically, and really set a high tempo. And I just don't think that Volkanovski at this point in his career is going to be willing to go to the real deep depths in which he needs to, I feel like, to be able to beat and to be able to go through and get into the later rounds with Diego Lopes. If he did, then he might be able to showcase his skills if Lopes does slow down, but I just don't feel like it will get into the later rounds, and I think Lopes will win via TKO in round 2. It's gonna be really sad to see if this does happen. Obviously Volkanovski's a legend and he probably will retire, and that's expected. It's kind of an all or nothing type of fight, this one, realistically, because I'm sure after the amount of title fights in which he's had in a row that he's probably not going to want to take that step down, and I don't blame him. And if he gets knocked out again, that's again another mental thing where it's going to be just continually getting knocked out is not going to be good for you mentally. So this could be a retirement fight for Volkanovski, but for Diego Lopes, he then becomes this new champion, and this champion who's been progressed to the title very quickly, and probably will end up fighting, like I say, Pitbull, Rodriguez, the winner, or Evloev, possibly. Like I say, I doubt that fight would happen, but he is that new champion, and he will be entertaining to see his reign, and maybe it might be longer because of Topuria not being around in the featherweight division anymore. And I feel like there will be always that question mark, though, if he never fights Topuria, as kind of like if you aren't the true featherweight champion because you haven't fought Topuria, and that's kind of like an Aspinall Jones situation in which we're seeing at the moment. But yeah, that is it for today's video. Hope you did enjoy. Like the video if you did, like the video, subscribe if you're new, and thanks for watching.